Hi guys, we're back and we're here to talk about God's Not Dead 3. I hope you guys are excited. I'm excited as always. Let's just jump right into it. First of all, I wanted to look up the Rotten Tomatoes score on this movie because a lot of times I find myself agreeing with the scores on there. So I wanted to see, and it's a bit rough, I'm not gonna lie, but the good thing is they're consistent at least. Very, very consistent. So this movie, God's Not Dead 3, it's called A Light in Darkness, focuses on Pastor Dave. Now, the problem is, Pastor Dave has been in the last two movies, and I haven't talked about him at all, really, because his storyline has been so boring. And I had somebody comment on my last video talking about, like, he's gonna be a main character now. And so I was like, shit. So sorry, I did you guys a disservice. So yeah, I did you guys a disservice. Pastor Dave is now the main character. He's the one who, like, fainted in the courtroom in the last movie. He just is like in these roles that were really nothing up until this point. Okay, so if you watched my last video, you know that there was a scene based very loosely on an event that happened in 2014 in Houston, Texas, where some city lawyers issued subpoenas to a few pastors during a legal dispute about the Houston Equal Rights Act, which is a local anti-discrimination law. In this scene, in movie 2, if you watch my last video, in this scene, in the second movie, they are vaguely talking about how they were being persecuted for simply being Christians and basically the world was out to get them, blah, 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 blah. They were super vague about it for a reason. I talked about this. In real life, they were only asked for a couple sermons. Like, some pastors were asked to provide a couple sermons involving politics, because they wanted to make sure these pastors weren't politically organizing at their churches, which isn't allowed, one of the reasons being that they are tax exempt as churches. In reality, pastors were not jailed. These lawyers also backed off really quickly due to backlash, so basically not much happened. But in this scene, in the second movie, they made it seem like the world was out to get them just simply because they were Christians and they were being persecuted. Anyways, I'm rehashing all of that because this movie starts with a pastor being arrested.
You're under arrest.
Contempt of court. You failed to produce your sermons upon court order.
Which never happened. This is fanfic romanticizing their persecution because, again, for a lot of Christians, persecution equals good, and it equals being a true follower of Jesus. Then he gets released, and people are protesting because he got arrested in the first place. Which, yeah, would have been crazy if that actually happened, but it didn't. So then once Pastor Dave is released from prison, for being a Christian, they show the pastor dropping off food at a food pantry or soup kitchen, and I want to comment really quick. I think sometimes churches really can provide a lot of good aid for people in need. I'm not saying there isn't, like, an underlying agenda there, but like, obviously there are churches that do really help people, like, get them fed and stuff like this. What really bothers me, though, is the way that we can help people more effectively and widely is through legislation, and they always vote against that. For example, SNAP, I always hear Christians rail against it, saying, no free handouts, and then they go to a soup kitchen and give free handouts. It's odd. I don't know if you guys, saw that woman who was doing that social experiment with calling churches. Essentially, she would call churches with an audio of, like, a fake baby crying in the background saying that she needed formula, asking them for formula, and most of the churches said no. And there were some people in line saying that churches actually aren't required to help the less fortunate, except that's not true because one of the main reasons they are tax exempt is because they are seen as a non-profit organization and they are supposed to operate for the public good, not for profit. But we see mega churches, like, obviously that's not the case in a lot of mega churches. I think that's where people get frustrated because many of these people vote against federally authorized programs created and legislated by the government to help people, but then they have limits on who they are willing to help out. Even if these churches help out people, they can only do so much. Not everybody helps like that. So yeah, we need other ways for people to get help. Anyways, that's my tangent. It's super maddening to me to hear people vote against programs that would help people get fed and, like, just financial assistance, but then they volunteered a soup kitchen for Christmas and, like, talk about that, which, yeah, that's nice. I'm not saying that's not nice, but it isn't reaching as many people as it could. If you actually cared about people, if you actually cared about people getting help, you would vote for these programs, right? Anyways, that's my tangent. The next thing that happens is the church gets attacked and vandalized after he comes back to preaching at his church for some reason. So his co-pastor, Jude, he is also in the first and second movies as like his pal or like co-pastor. He officially makes him co-pastor at the beginning of this movie, but before I guess they were just like pastor friends. They see that the church has been vandalized. Jude goes into the church, into the basement where they see that a brick has been thrown through the window. Pastor Jude goes to check it out, right? He gets to the basement and you can see that there's some kind of gas leak and it just explodes. Jude is knocked out. Pastor Dave goes to save him. He drags him out of a burning building. But he ends up dying outside of the building in his arms, basically, after pulling him out.
Please, God. Oh, help!
And the church burns down. So both his co-pastor dies and the church burns down. Off to a super dramatic start to the movie. So after that traumatic scene, they introduce a couple, and their names are Keaton and Adam. The girl, in this scene, the girl ignores a call from her mom, and she talks about how her parents would freak out if they knew she was skipping church and questioning her faith, and her boyfriend talks about how he went through the same thing, but he just got out sooner than she did. Uh-oh, I sense an unequally yoked relationship. Most of you probably know what that means. It's basically like you want to be with someone who has the same morals and values and believes in God like you do, type of stuff. And they obviously aren't on the exact same page, even though she's questioning, he's like already done with it, I guess. Now we're at a scene where the couple is with their friends, and they are kind of shitting on Christians, and the friends say to her, well, you don't get it because you're one of them, basically. And her boyfriend pipes up and says, not really anymore. And she's like, excuse me? And she gets upset. Which, yeah, I understand, because the dude is like airing out all of her personal business in front of her friends. Like, don't do that. And then they get into a little fight about God and how they don't agree. And then she says, I want some time alone to figure things out. So, fair enough. Then she walks to Pastor Dave's church. And, oh my gosh, guess who she sees there? That's right, Josh. From God's Not Dead, the original. Keaton interacts with Josh and says she's sorry she's been missing church, and he's like, it's fine, I get it. And now we're at a college party, and her boyfriend, Keaton's boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, whatever, Adam, is feeling sad, mad, and he's drinking and throwing shit, and he's by a church and he gets mad. So he spray paints an X over the church's sign thing. You know what I mean? The one that usually says like welcome or like a small message. He spray paints an X over that. And then can you guess what he does next? Yep, he throws a brick through the basement window. So this is actually a flashback to right before Pastor Dave and Pastor Jude discover that the church has been vandalized. So he throws a brick into the basement window, and it actually hit like the gas pipe thing, and that's why there was a gas leak in the church's basement. Then it shows the news, and they said they are treating this as a hate crime homicide, and Adam sees this and obviously gets really freaked out because he was not trying to kill anybody. Then people gather around the church that was burnt down, and someone is heard saying, this is why we can't favor one religion over another. It just invites violence like this. What else is it gonna take for people to wake up? Girl, what? He wasn't mad that one religion was favored over the other. He was mad that his girlfriend and him were in a fight and she wouldn't text him back, but pop off, I guess. And you hear some reporters say the church has brought controversy to the school for years. So I wanted to look into whether or not it's normal for public colleges to have on-campus chapels like that. And obviously in private schools like Liberty University, it's typical to my understanding, but it's less common for a church to belong to a campus within a public university. Although the churches are still physically located next to or even on leased land near the campus. So to my understanding, typically, if it is university owned, the school must stay neutral and not in favor of one religion. But if it's leased or donated property, then the church can exist there legally as long as it is not funded by public money. Which, yeah, all of that makes sense to me. So once again, this is them having a huge issue with the separation of church and state. So here we go again with turning the separation of church and state into this persecution victim complex story about how the world is against Christians specifically, even though this rule applies to all the other religions as well. So now they're showing people who are part of the school board for the university, and they talk about how the church is causing them some real issues.
Our enrollment is down 18%. We stand to lose $15 million this year alone.
And then the one guy brings up how it's actually a historic landmark that was there before the university was there. So yeah, since the church was there first, it makes things a little more complicated. I feel like they definitely added this to muddy the waters and not make it so straightforward. So to my understanding, there are real cases of this, and it obviously gets a little complicated. And if this were the case, it would come down to a property law dispute or historical preservation issue, not a battle over religious freedom. But of course, this is what they are going for this is what they're going to make it about. But saying the church was here before the university in the story is on purpose to give the pastor the moral high ground. In real life, when this has happened, there are just arrangements made for this kind of thing. And it's not about ideological or religious showdowns, but they got to do it for the plot, or how else are they going to feel persecuted if it's just about property arrangements and not about spiritual battles or good versus evil. Then the head guy of the school board, I guess, talks to Dave, and Dave is like, "You're really going to knock down the church due to political agenda? All right, Dave, let's slow down." He's already getting worked up about political agendas, whatever that means. In the next scene, they show Dave and the people involved in his church coming together for a meeting. This includes Josh from the first movie. I guess he's like a youth pastor or something, it looks like. And he talks about how he used to study property law in grad school, and it's about eminent domain. Side note, I guess Josh was able to continue his academic career because that evil atheist professor he was fighting with from the first movie wasn't able to destroy his academic career.
I will make it my personal mission to destroy any hope of a law degree in your future.
Because, well, you know what happens. I had to do that. So to my understanding, Josh is saying that the church, they own the land the church sits on. So the only way they can take it is through eminent domain, which means the government steps in, takes private property for public use, and pays the owner money for it. So to my understanding, Josh is saying the university cannot just take this from us since we own it. They would need to go through the state's legal process. But also, I'm not a lawyer, so if somebody who knows about property law, please leave a comment. Let me know if I'm understanding this correctly. Now we are seeing Dave and Josh outside of the church that night, and they get to talking. Josh talks about how Keaton, the girl who's in the relationship with Adam, the couple that's in this movie, about how she came to church for the first time in months the other day, and how she's lost.
She's lost. There are hundreds more like her.
Then he says, this is why I took on Professor Radisson, the evil professor from the first movie, and that's why I left law school. Oof. First of all, Josh, let's not speak ill of the dead. But it is funny to me how they tie all these movies together like this. And he left law school to be a part of the church. That didn't make any sense to me. This is like a small looking church. I don't know how he makes enough to have like a full-time job at this church and why he would leave law school for this. Like, why can't you do both? Maybe at a mega church it makes sense. I don't know. But this does not seem like that. It also bothers me that instead of saying somebody is questioning things or figuring out their beliefs like Keaton is, they say that they are lost. Saying someone is lost implies that there's some sort of deficiency instead of discovery or curiosity. It always seems negative. It's like something they feel like they need to cure or fix instead of it just being like this natural human curiosity. It is always about the in-group versus the out-group. You are either lost or you are saved. It removes any room for nuance. It's a way to shut down any kind of dialogue that isn't just part of their theology. So anyways, I hate that term, like being lost, because that's like saying something's wrong with you for having a human mind, human curiosity, or even having different thoughts than this type of Christian theology. Josh is basically telling the pastor they can't give up, and God doesn't want him to give up because there are so many lost students at the school, including Keaton. Now Dave meets with a lawyer, and his name is Pierce, and says, this is a good offer for the property. You should probably take it, because if you go to court, you'll probably get half of that. And Dave says,
God called me to fight. I'm gonna fight.
Now we see Keaton and Adam again together, that unequally yoked couple. And Adam wants to talk to Keaton, and he tells her everything about the vandalism, and he's super upset, obviously, because he didn't mean to literally kill somebody. I do feel bad for him because he was just being a stupid drunk kid and then somebody died. I mean, that's like really traumatic. Now we're at a scene where this lawyer that Dave met up with, Pierce, is gonna stay the night at his house. This was confusing because I was confused about what their relationship was and why he was staying at his house. But I guess he didn't live nearby. The next morning, Pastor Dave and his lawyer Pierce, they go to breakfast, and Pierce says the government takes private property all the time. End of story. Then they go to the church, showing it really like burnt up, destroyed essentially, and they reminisce about going to this church together. And then Pierce, the lawyer, tells him he'll fight for him. Then he calls him little brother. So this is when we find out they're actually brothers. That's why he stayed the night at his house. He flew in from out of town to help his brother with this case. Then they show Keaton and Adam again, the couple. They are talking about Adam confessing. He is in a lot of distress. He feels like he should probably confess. And then ask Keaton,
Do you think that he would forgive me?
this is the whole narrative of finding God when you're at your lowest. They have shown this idea throughout the movies of God bringing people closer to him through suffering, which if that's true, that God uses suffering to get people to need him or to bring them closer to him, that seems super abusive and manipulative. We wouldn't accept that in any other kind of relationship, so I don't know why people accept it here. Then we see Josh calling Pastor Dave, and Dave drives to the church and sees that they are tearing down the church. These construction workers are tearing it down, and one of the construction workers says that he has a demo permit signed by the president of the university. Then Dave's brother, the lawyer, Pierce, tells the man to stop or he'll have him arrested. Dave decides to hold a service outside of the burnt up building, and the construction workers are like outside being like, shaking their heads. Then his brother goes to this other church to find the judge, and she's like in mass, and he's like trying to talk to her. And then the cops show up to the church where Dave is preaching, and these news reporters show up too for some reason. And then the reporters call this a filibuster. The cops show up and basically threaten to arrest them, but at the last minute, Dave's brother, the lawyer, Pierce, shows up and is like, nah, I gotta cease and desist, and it bought them 3 more weeks, so y'all better get the heck out of here. Then after all of this happens, Dave and his brother go back to Dave's house. Dave's brother kind of calls him out. He says that Christians love to play victim. He says that the church has a long history of persecuting people, and then those people push back, and then like the Christians cry victim, which yeah, that has happened a lot. And then Dave's response to this is,
every example of someone who's misrepresented Jesus for some twisted reason, there are 100 others who have done good in his name.
Which kind of annoys me because he's essentially saying those people weren't true Christians, which we hear people say this all the time when they kind of want to ignore any kind of bad things that have happened in the name of Christianity in the past, to ignore any kind of accountability. And then he says, I don't really care about history, I'm talking about now, which convenient, but it also does happen now as well. Now we're at the scene where Dave is taking a walk with this lady from the soup kitchen, and he explains that his brother Pierce used to be his hero and really strong in his faith until...
But it was more than just confusion. It's darker than that.
Then he says that when he no longer believed, his parents had felt like they lost their son.
Felt like they lost their son.
You lost your hero.
That's really messed up in my opinion. Obviously, I guess they can't control how they feel, right? Like, if they genuinely believe what they believe, they're gonna have that feeling. But that's really gonna hurt your child if you're basically saying, like, I feel like they died. Just because they chose a different path than you. Like, maybe you shouldn't be having kids if that's the case. Having kids isn't like Build-A-Bear. You can't just decide what you want your kids to believe. If you're not okay with your kid, if you're not going to be able to handle your kid believing something different than you or becoming an atheist, I genuinely don't think you should have kids, because you don't have, like, you're not allowing them to be their own person. You're not okay with them being their own person. That's messed up to me. That's really unfair. You're not bringing a baby into this world. You're bringing a person into this world with all of their complexities, and you don't get to decide who they are and what they believe. So if you're not okay with them coming to a different conclusion than you, maybe you shouldn't be having kids in the first place. That's really hurtful to the person experiencing that reaction. And you would have to accept that. and feeling like you lost their kid because they formed their own opinions is not accepting, and that is extremely unfair to the child you decide to have. Now we're at the scene where Dave and his brother Pierce meet with the school board, and they get into like a bickering match, and Dave's brother threatens to sue them because he says what they're doing is illegal. Now we're watching the news, and they start to talk about diversity and tolerance. Again.
All of these college administrators, they go on and on and on about diversity and tolerance and inclusion, but yet when it's asked of them, they run you off of campus. That doesn't sound very tolerant or inclusive to me.
Mind you, this was in 2018, and they talked about this in God's Not Dead 2 as well, which was made in 2016. I honestly didn't know they were so obsessed with the DEI thing even back then, and it's super frustrating because they always say this thing of like, diversity and tolerance until it's Christians, right? Which makes me roll my eyes, because a lot of times it's in response to Christians wanting to force their religion onto other people. Obviously, people aren't going to tolerate when you want to take things away, like their ability to get married, like gay marriage, or take away a woman's right to choose what to do with her own body, like her own autonomy. Yeah, it makes sense they're not going to tolerate like oppressive tools towards themselves. Like, yeah, it's not, I don't know, it's frustrating. And also, diversity and tolerance, like, you are part of the biggest, most popular belief system in the United States. You are not being discriminated against in any kind of way. Now we're at a scene where they're showing the news again. They love to do that in these movies. Anyways, in this news scene is the newsboys on the news. And real quick side note, a lot of you guys commented on my last video about this controversy surrounding one of the newsboys. Didn't know anything about it, so I looked it up. It's about Michael Tate, the main newsboy that talks in these movies. He's like the main one talking in any of these scenes when they show the newsboys, including this one. So apparently he's being investigated for sexually assaulting 3 males in the early 2000s. Allegedly, he may have drugged 2 of them. I'm saying allegedly in this stuff because I don't think he's had like his, you know, official hearing and stuff like that. The newsboys were dropped from their label and pulled off of some radio stations because of this. Apparently, Michael Tate was also a heavy supporter of Donald Trump and incorporated right-wing talking points into his music. Him supporting Trump doesn't shock me at all, because most evangelicals do not find the fact that Donald Trump was found liable for sexual assault to be any kind of deal breaker. Apparently, other Christian bands didn't have much to say about this, but you know who did? Hayley Williams. I love that girl. She made a comment saying the Christian music industry enabled it. She also said, "I hope this CCM industry crumbles, and fuck all of you who knew and didn't say a damn thing." Yeah. She has actually released some good deconstruction music lately, if you've heard any of it, and she's been speaking out a lot about a lot of social issues, and it's really awesome to see. She talks about this kind of stuff because growing up she was surrounded by the Christian music industry. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anyways, Michael, in this clip, Michael Tate on the news, he brings up horizontal versus vertical morality.
Sometimes we get so caught up in the vertical, we forget the horizontal, forget each other.
Which I'm so glad he brought it up, because this is actually the biggest issue I have with religion in general. He explains in a way that Christianity is about both and about how they can intersect, which, yeah, obviously they can intersect. So I want to explain in case some of you don't understand what I'm talking about. So it's this idea that there is like vertical morality and horizontal morality. Horizontal morality is concerned with how things are going to impact those around you, impact other people. And vertical morality is about what God thinks, like you pleasing or serving God. So a lot of times for Christians, this is their main issue, not how it impacts other people. So that's why they're okay sometimes with taking away people's rights, even though it hurts people, because their main thing is serving God, not others. And again, sometimes those things can intersect, right? But if they have to choose between the two, they're gonna choose God because he's the main authority. That's who they care about the most. If that means that you have to hurt other people for his glory, then so be it. We see that in the Bible where God commands people to do awful things. So it might hurt other people, but they're doing it for God. That's all that matters. For example, God commanding Moses and his men to take revenge on the Midianites. Like, yeah, they're hurting other people, including slaughtering women and children, but you know, the most important thing is that they're listening to their authority, that they're doing what's right in God's eyes, doing what God says. It's not about the people around them, right? So yeah, to a lot of Christians, the vertical morality is always going to be more important than the horizontal because God is the main priority, always. Now we see Keaton and Adam at a party talking. Adam talks about how his dad used to beat his mom, so his mom left him, and the church responded with,
They called her a sinner. They said that if she married again, she'd be an adulterer.
Boo, you whore.
Another case of someone not believing because they were hurt. And the old people hurt you, not Jesus thing, which obviously gets really frustrating. They always talk about like church hurt and about how that's people's fault, not God's fault, so you shouldn't leave because of that. Then later we have Dave, Pierce, and Josh talking over pizza. Pierce is asking him about dropping out of law school and asked him what he was studying, and Josh says civil rights and social justice. And Pierce says, really? You don't strike me as a liberal. And then Josh says, I don't think standing up for the oppressed is exclusive to a political agenda. And then Pierce asks him if his beliefs get in the way of real social change. And Josh says, no, my beliefs are the foundation of change. The belief that every human is made in the image of God.
Jesus was the ultimate social justice warrior.
He said the lives of children mattered and regarded women with dignity and honor. Which is funny to me because I know a decent amount of Christians who don't want gay people to be allowed to be legally married. That's oppressing certain groups of people. And like wanting to insert their religion into politics. That also oppresses certain groups of people because you are not respecting people's freedom from religion. You can see this by putting it in public schools and taking away people's reproductive rights because you don't think your religion agrees with abortion. Not to mention the way they treat trans people and are perfectly fine with them being discriminated against, like Donald Trump forcing trans people out of the military. But I digress. Okay, now we see one of the main guys from the school board, the chairman from the board, get a brick thrown through his window by somebody for some reason. Not given to us yet. I don't think it ever gets given to us. But then he goes to Dave's house and blames him, and they get in a fist fight.
You did this!
Next scene, we are at court with all of them, and Dave tells the judge that the community is voicing their opinions loudly, and that shows the value of their church to the community, and that's why they shouldn't get rid of it. Then, later on, Dave gets a random text from an unknown number saying that the Adam kid started the fire, and then Dave goes to find the kid, and he's gone rogue, and he pushes him down and gets a little crazy.
Tell me! You killed Jude, didn't you?
Then Adam gets arrested, and Adam's friend says that they're going to protest this on Friday night at Dave's church. Not exactly sure what they're protesting. I guess they're like protesting. They seem like they want them to take it easy on Adam for what he did. Then the school board is shown condemning Adam's actions, like to the press, and saying that they are going to expel him, and they encourage the law to prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. But then they also condemn the actions of Dave, and they think basically this gives them a better case as to why they should get rid of Dave's church. Then they show Keaton and Josh sitting together, and Keaton basically says that Christians should act better, or else what's the point? And then she says, look what my friend sent me years ago when I was in high school, and then she shows Josh this. Now we're seeing Pastor Dave just kind of spiraling, and then he goes to talk to another pastor. Like, he's just really angry and doesn't know how to contain it, essentially. He goes to this other pastor is giving him advice, and then Dave is like, you wouldn't get it because you weren't the one being attacked. And the pastor says this.
Brother, who do you think you're talking to? I'm a black preacher in the deep south.
Which, like, yeah, true. Why would you say that to a black man? Like, you don't know what it's like to be attacked. And then Dave goes home, and him and his brother, he comes home and his brother's getting ready to leave, essentially. They keep getting in these little spats, nothing like too serious, but now they're like getting in an actual fight, like yelling wise, not physically. They start to get into it about their childhood. Pierce brought up the fact that basically, after he started questioning God, he wasn't welcome in their family. And then Dave says, is that what they were? Tough questions? Why did you allow bad, and then he lists off the two questions. He says, why does God allow bad things happen to good people? Or how do we even know God exists? Which are both very valid questions, but he frames them in a way like, oh, they're so ridiculous, they're so nothing. And then he says, Dave says to Pierce, maybe you were just trying to impress someone, which it's like he's saying there's no way you actually had these questions. You were just trying to make it seem like you were smarter for somebody, and which was dumb, in my opinion. Then Dave explains how he was angry about Pierce leaving, because Dave had to take care of their dying parents and that he broke their hearts. Then Pierce says to Dave that Dave broke his heart for not trying to understand him and where he was coming from. And he said he was changing and they all hated him for it. Which is the first and honest thing I've seen come from this series, honestly. I was shocked that they let an atheist have a voice and like talk about some real things. And basically after this fight, Dave is basically crying out to God, saying he doesn't know what to do and to ask God to show him what to do next. But no, I really do think it was good that they put this in here, because that's something that so many of us deal with when deconstructing, is just feeling so, what is the word? So disconnected from our families. Some people's families cut ties with them. Like, there's all these things that are really painful, and you feel like you're being punished for being your own person, having your own opinions, questioning the status quo. And so I was just kind of shocked that they put that in there, because yeah, it doesn't make Christians look good that they do that they like basically reject their own kids because they don't stick with the religion that they want them to stick with. So props to them for actually, it's like, since the first two movies, they've actually talked to an atheist for once. So, I mean, that's progress, right? Okay, now we're seeing Keaton. She shows up to Dave, and they go visit Adam in jail. Because remember, he's in jail for throwing the brick in the window. And Adam tells Pastor Dave that he was actually the one who sent him a text from an unknown number, and he wanted to confess. Then Adam is given Jude's Bible. Dave gives Adam Jude's Bible, the pastor who passed away, and Adam breaks down, saying he's sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Then Pastor Dave goes to the chairman, like the guy from the school board, and he advocates for Adam to have a lesser charge, saying Adam shouldn't be collateral damage, and they essentially apologize to each other. Now we see a protest at the church where they are protesting the church being there, I guess, and Adam being arrested. Dave asks the cops to talk to, like, if he can talk to the crowd, and then he asks the crowd for forgiveness and talks about how he heard God's voice, and God said the building is not my church, and he's withdrawing his lawsuit. Then they all light candles for some reason. Then there's a Newsboys concert again. Just kidding. And this one there is no Newsboys concert apparently. But then the news says that Pastor Dave has become a symbol of forgiveness, and says perhaps the rest of the country can take a page from this book, aka the Bible. Then Adam is released from jail. Huzzah! And they show Dave and his church community building a new church somewhere else. Then they show Keaton, the girl from the couple, her and Adam. They show Keaton sitting down, saying she can hear God again finally, and then she creates a post that says, duh, you can't end without that. Now, I will say I don't think this one is as bad as the first two, if I'm being completely honest. I think the reason for that, now, it's not like by big margins or something. I think a reason for that is there wasn't a big bad atheist villain in this one. They made the characters a tiny bit more complex than that, which I can appreciate. This shows up through atheist characters being given a little bit of a voice, and Christianity taking a little bit of criticism, as it should. I'm not sure what changed between the first two movies and this one. Maybe they got a lot of shit for how they portrayed anybody different than them. It would be interesting to find that out. I'm not sure how I would, but yeah, they show a little more complexity for atheists, other than they're bitter and mean and sad and whatever else. For example, his brother talking about how his family acted like he wasn't welcome at home once he no longer thought just like them, which again is a very real thing for people who leave religion. They have to face that. A lot of people have to face that. I know for many ex-Christians, it's the hardest part about leaving the religion is it changes and impacts their relationships and their relationship dynamics. So it's really difficult to go through. Again, I'm shocked that they're putting that in there, to be honest. Now, we are still doing the whole country versus us thing, or the world versus us, where they are still railing against the idea of separation of church and state without saying it plainly. The movie still went with the persecution complex story, which is obviously getting pretty boring. I don't know what other concept they would use for these movies, so I have a feeling that this is going to be the main concept of God's Not Dead 4 and 5. Yes, there's 2 more. We'll see what those are like. One last thing I want to mention that I strongly dislike about this movie is them taking that little nugget of truth of what happened in 2014 in Houston, Texas, with like those subpoenas for specific sermons, into something that gives them the ability to play the victim. Like they can't go a lot based off of that one little thing that happened, because they weren't like persecuted. They weren't heavily persecuted in any kind of way. So they have to make it up. And it's like, if you have to make up fan fiction about this like persecution scenario, maybe you just aren't persecuted. At least like in the United States as a white Christian. If you have to make this up, you probably aren't being persecuted. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, I don't think this one was as bad as 1 and 2. We'll see what happens in 4 and 5. Let me know if there's any other pieces of media you guys want me to cover like this, because obviously this is going to come to an end soon. And I actually enjoyed this. I like analyzing different pieces of Christian media. It's been interesting to like go back and look through the lens of like basically evangelicalism. So yeah, let me know if there's anything specific. I know some of you have mentioned some things, and I've been writing a list to see what I want to cover. So if you have any ideas for me, write them in the comments section. Anything related to like, you know, Christian nationalism, evangelicalism, deconstruction, religion, so I can get some ideas of what to do, projects on next, what I can talk about next, or yeah, things you would like me to cover in general. I hope you guys are doing good. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.